to follow, so I'll try my best. Just so that I know like the level of detail and stuff, how many of you have heard of AutoEdit before? Okay, how many of you have used AutoEdit? Okay, cool. So just a little context. Last year I did a fellowship with the Live Mozilla Foundation and Open News Vox Media, and it's like a 10-month thing that I did in New York, and it gave me a chance to revisit a project I've been working on for a while and work across the different brands that Vox has with the video producers and find a way for them to make it easier to work with video interviews in the context of documentary production, documentary news. Like my main use case is like documentary, making like a video documentary. So yeah, making video production faster, easier, and more accessible. This is actually out of date. The current version is 1.6, but like 1.0.5 had 776 downloads from November to March in terms of like user base, but I'm not doing a great job of keeping track of who's actually using it outside of Vox. In terms of like choices of how to make it and stuff, I made it as a desktop application for Mac, and I'll go into more details about the stack in a second. And the main reason for that was that even though it's using web technologies, if you're working on like a documentary and that's the use case, then your video can come from like a camcorder and it can be like a huge file. So we were looking at like events done by Recode, for example, where the video of like a conference could be like 100 gig. There's no way you can sensibly put that online. And if you want to transcode it to put it online, that is gonna slow down everything in terms you have to wait for the transcoding. But if you use FFmpeg and you're running on the machine, converting that to audio doesn't take that long. It's pretty fast. And then that you can kind of split and send to the speech-text service. So that was kind of like the reason why the first version is like a desktop for the Mac, and yeah. And it's Mac because most of the users were using Macs, but it could be Linux and Windows as well. It gives you a video sequence once you've done with your selections and stuff. Is an EDL, which has been mentioned by Chris before as well. And just to recap what an EDL is, just like a list of instructions, and then you can open it into the software and it just reconnects the stuff in there. The kind of like key points of features and stuff that it does is that when you upload the video or audio file, it's compatible with both. It chunks them into 5 minutes blocks and sends them all at the same time to the speech-to-text service, and that means that you always have like a 5-minute turnaround time. And this is an idea that came from Sam Levine, who worked on Videograph. He was doing like a script to talk to IBM Watson using this system. So I take no credit for that, but I think it's pretty genius because it's super fast then to get your transcription done. It supports a bunch of different languages using the IBM Watson service at the moment. I'm also looking into adding like Google and other ones, but these are the ones that are currently supported in the current version. It also supports the gentle speech-to-text system that you can run locally if you want to do offline transcriptions, which is the next point. I also added Pocket Sphinx in there as an option for the speech-to-text, which is now in the screen check as a recent thing. But the Pocket Sphinx accuracy, it's a little less, but it's got the kind of setup so that if you want to put like a better language model to it and make it better with either the gentle stuff or the Pocket Sphinx one, you could have like a free transcription that works offline. And I had loads of requests from people that were actually using it for captioning, so I added a possibility to export an SRT file. The SRT file is not great, like you get your SRT file, but it's got the same lines that IBM has arbitrarily decided. So I'm at the moment looking into like what's a better way to like do the breaking of the lines and the alignment, and having like an SRT that requires a little less work for the user once they receive it. So yeah, kind of like outcomes of it is that it speeds up video production process. It allows you to do like better kind of story crafting and increases the kind of collaborations because they can kind of discuss at the level of the text and the planning of it, so to speak, between editor, like video editor and producer. And it doesn't require the video editing software to get up to that point of the rough cut. So this is the latest things that I added in the last couple of months, which is the paper editing feature. So obviously like, the interface is like very much the same as what iProdio does, even though it's implemented differently. It doesn't do a drag and drop because I found as well that was like slowing down things. So as soon as you do a selection, it appears on the other side. And then you can also see the video preview or audio preview of what you the selections you've made. So that kind of shortens the feedback loop before exporting into the video editing software choice. This I already said. In terms of stack, I started with NWJS, and then I moved to Electron because the documentation was better. Certain things were a little better in NWJS in terms of like the ease of use and reusability of stuff, but Electron has got a lot more components and more bigger community, so I'm considerably happy with the choice so far. So it uses Backbone with all these dependencies, then Node, Bootstrap, FFmpeg, FFmpeg behind the scene, and a bunch of like Node modules. Yeah, so the point I wanted to make is that, I'll show you here so that, so because I'm using web technologies in a desktop application, so to speak, then what happens is that if you look at the demo is just like a dummy online. This whole part is the front end of a web application. So you can like, and this is something I want to do in the future, is like you can make like a web app that is got this part in common with the desktop app with very little code changes. So that's something that I kind of encourage you to think about if you're doing like web and desktop applications with Electrons and other things, in terms of like the amazing possibilities there are now for like code reusability. And also like it's already mobile responsive as well. So even though that doesn't really matter for the current desktop application and stuff, if I do like a web version of it, I got less stuff to do. I mean, I still got to tweak some UI and UX stuff, but the setup is already in place. These are some of the usable components I want to kind of take out of that. Even though I moved to Electron, I still have like a NWJS boilerplate that is useful for prototyping stuff. So Gentoo gives you like a server that does the local host that you can run, and it gives you the transcriptions. But I made a Node module that you can use to connect to that, make it a little easier to make the request. There's an EDL composer module that can be used if you're following the kind of specification of the sequence to create EDLs. The SRT composer is a little, actually no, the SRT composer is a module that I'm not using in there, but I prototyped and I made available on NPM. So that allows you to like create an SRT from a JSON that represents the SRT and do a bunch of other things that you can look into. I have like a transcriber module that does the IBM Watson speech-to-text recognition. And this one, I'm looking ways to extend it so that it becomes a bit more modular to add like Google speech-to-text, Microsoft, and the other options, so that the user can decide which one they want to use. There's a metadata reader module that gets the basic information that you need to do the EDL, and that's one of the biggest issues to do it. Basically, if you do it as a web app and you want to connect to the original footage, you need to have the metadata of the original footage. Otherwise, it's more difficult to kind of do the reconnect. At least in like traditional video editing. With Adobe, that might be a little easier. So that's just something to look into. Converting to WebM video preview, there's a module for that, and then converting to the audio specification for the speech-to-text stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to go into all the other ones. The related project stuff are just like things that led up to this app. The transcriber app is like the first test that I did to see if the people were going to be accepting the speech-to-text quality. So it was like super bare, super simple. Put it in front of the user, asked them to give me a file that they were going to be using, and then give them the transcription, and then I asked them what you're going to do with this. The interesting thing that I found is that the journalists were like, this has got like 3 errors, I'm not going to do anything with it, I'm going to transcribe it manually. But the video producers were like, oh, this is great, I can just like, if you can give me time codes, I can do a paper edit with it. So that's why I kind of focused more on that use case. Roadmap, adding more languages, as I mentioned, finding a better way to export the SRT file, even though now I'm thinking that the captioning thing could probably be like a separate app instead of like bloating auto-edit with that. Searching and filtering transcriptions, something I need to add. Speaker diarization, as soon as I can find like a decent one. Group transcription by projects. At the moment, everything is in the same bucket, so to speak. And then long-term roadmap is like mobile version of this, so that you could like from your phone record something, put it into auto-edit, get the transcription in 5 minutes, do the text edit, and then maybe push it into social media. Multi-user collaboration would be good for the web app as well. Working with a live stream is a use case that keeps coming up when people are working with conferences, events, and news, or all sort of stuff like that. And for that, even integrating with Open Caption could be a good way around that to get like accurate text out of it. And then better text editing, like Chris was saying, like if we can find a way to have like a good way of editing the text for people, that could be great. Even though I've seen that that's more of a pressing issue for like captioning rather than the actual documentary production side of things as much. Right, the vision, like super long term, this is gonna take me a while. So imagine that you have like a bunch of videos, like as many as you want, and you feed them into the system. The system goes through it, transcribes them, analyzes them, similar to the video indexer stuff that we saw yesterday with Microsoft. So like figure out who the speakers are, figure out the concept of things they're talking about, what are the keywords, what kind of stuff it connects with, and then it gives you all that analysis available in terms of what the transcriptions, but it also gives you the sort of paper edit and rough sequence automatically generated. I think it's the type of thing that initially will look rubbish in terms of the story. It's not going to make a lot of sense, but then with a bit of tweaking in terms of the abstraction and the steps that it takes to do that, you could get to a stage where you get like a pretty decent rough cut that then people can use it to build on top of that. And that's it. Do you have any questions or anything? Okay, cool. Yeah, so the other thing I want to do now. I think before we wrap up, if there are any other questions, the last thing I want to do is to, I've asked a bunch of folks to do some remote presentations.